We think we can recognize evil, a dark lord, a monstrous army, a terrifying shadow spreading across the land. But Tolkien's darkest and most hidden lesson is far more unsettling. What if evil doesn't begin with armies or war, but in the quiet moments of compromise, the small betrayals we justify, the hidden rationalizations of power? And if evil begins this way, would we even notice? This is Middle-earth Unveiled, and my fervent wish today is that you would find hope after watching this episode. In many tales, evil arrives loudly, openly, unmistakably, clad in armor, bearing a sword, announcing its terrible presence. And indeed, the battles at Minas Tirith and Helm's Deep showed evil clearly enough. But Tolkien, ever insightful, challenges us further. What if the enemy outside the gates isn't our greatest threat? What if the true danger lurks not in war horns or marching armies, but in the quiet promises made behind closed doors? Evil's whispers rarely threaten. Instead, they reassure. They speak of necessary compromises and pragmatic solutions. Saruman believed his alliance with darkness was wise, essential for survival. Denethor, steward of Gondor, mistook hopelessness for realism, certain his despair was clear-sighted and prudent. Even Boromir, valiant and loyal, let the ring's whispered promises of strength for Gondor drown out his honor. And in the First Age, Turin-Turambar, proud and defiant, clung to his own judgment, blind to the curse his defiance invited. Yet, none realized that each subtle decision moved them closer to a darkness they never intended. As Tolkien warns in the Silmarillion, for nothing is evil in the beginning, even Sauron was not so. Their paths, paved with good intentions, led not to safety or triumph, but betrayal, tragedy, and loss. The chilling truth Tolkien understood deeply was that evil's most significant victories don't happen on battlefields. They happen quietly, silently, long before swords are ever drawn. And each of those quiet victories begins subtly, intimately, like the voice of someone we trust, gently suggesting that we abandon what we've always known to be right. Evil rarely introduces itself boldly. Saruman, once among the greatest and wisest, did not turn in a sudden blaze of malice. Instead, he took the smallest steps, each choice carefully reasoned, each justification more convincing than the last. And if you stop to think about it, so too did Fëanor, mightiest of elven smiths, who swore righteous oaths to avenge his father's death, only to kindle the ruin of his people. And so did Boromir, who believed the ring could save Gondor, even as its poison coiled around his heart. Saruman began by looking into the Palantir, thinking to match wits with the enemy. Instead, he heard whispers of doubt, promises of power. "A new age is upon us," he said softly to Gandalf. "We must adapt or perish." Adaptation, survival, words that mask the rot beneath as fair as Morgoth's lies to the elves of old. But Gandalf saw what Saruman did not. Each small compromise chipped away at wisdom, until reason became rationalization and caution became corruption. "It is not our part to master all the tides of the world," Gandalf would later say, "but to do what is with us, for the salvation of the years wherein we are set." Saruman, however, no longer sought to save, only to rule. This is Tolkien's chilling insight. Evil doesn't need to overpower us. It merely waits for us to convince ourselves that good can come from bending what we know is right. As shadow grows best in twilight, so does darkness thrive in the gap between conviction and compromise. But Saruman was not alone in hearing these whispers. Elsewhere, in Gondor's halls, another leader faced a different, yet equally subtle temptation. Someone who also gazed into the Palantir, seeking knowledge to protect his realm. Yet like Saruman, he mistook the enemy's taunts for clarity, a descent into despair disguised as unflinching wisdom. Far from Saruman's overt ambition was Denethor, steward of Gondor, a man whose sole purpose was to preserve hope and defend his people. But evil's whispers found him, speaking not of strength, but despair. Evil's whispers also found Thingol, the elven king of Doriath. who cloaked his pride in the guise of protecting his realm, until his demand for a Silmaril as bride price for his daughter Luthien sowed the seeds of his kingdom's ruin. And so Evil's whispers found Isildur too, who seized the One Ring not for glory, but as a weregild for his father's death, believing he could master its power for good. You know, Denethor did not crave power. He feared losing it. Each gaze into the Palantir reinforced his worst nightmares. He saw only ruin, only loss, and in his despair, mistook surrender for wisdom. "Why should we wish to live longer?" he sneered, his voice hollow as the tomb. To become like him? A bitter echo of Sauron's own nihilism. Denethor convinced himself that all was already lost, and when hope vanished, darkness quietly took its place. Tolkien's world is littered with such tragedies. The valiant Hurin, who defied Morgoth to his face, yet whose unyielding pride doomed his children. Or Gollum, who began his fall with a single gift taken in envy, whispered to be deserved. Tolkien reminds us chillingly, evil doesn't always break down gates. Often, it waits for the Guardian to open them willingly. As Gandalf laments, despair is only for those who see the end beyond all doubt. We do not. But Denethor, like so many, chose certainty over faith, a surrender disguised as clear sight. But what about those who truly meant well? What happens when a noble heart believes the whispered promise that power can be safely wielded, just once? Boromir was no traitor. His heart was noble, his courage unquestioned, his intentions pure. He loved his people deeply and fiercely, willing to face death to protect them. Yet Boromir was vulnerable precisely because of his noble heart. Evil found him not through malice, but through a whisper of compassion twisted by desperation. Just this once, he reasoned. Just long enough to save Gondor. He convinced himself the ring could be controlled, mastered, even if only briefly. But power, Tolkien shows us, isn't a servant. It's a tyrant. And the ring's grip tightened around him, turning love into obsession, protection into betrayal. Yet Tolkien also reminds us, redemption remains possible, even after tragic missteps. Boromir's legacy was not defined by his fall, but by his courage to rise again. But evil's ultimate goal was never merely to corrupt one man. It sought to erode the resolve of all who opposed it, quietly, relentlessly, until nothing was left. Evil isn't reserved solely for great lords or mighty warriors. Tolkien saw clearly that its whispers find their way into ordinary lives, people like us, living simple stories, making small choices. Lobelia Sackville Baggins, whose petty greed for spoons and silver festered into complicity with the Shire's usurpers. Theoden, once a noble king, reduced to a hollow shell by despair and Grima's honeyed lies, until even his people's courage seemed a flicker in the dark. It appears in quiet envy, subtle bitterness, or fearful complacency. Lobelia's petty greed, or Theoden's silent despair, were no less harmful, their consequences quietly spreading like ripples in still water. Lobelia scoffed at Bilbo's eccentricities, never guessing her disdain would one day aid Sharky's thugs. Theoden, slumped on his throne, called caution what was cowardice, blind to the rot in his own halls. Tolkien warns us clearly, evil thrives not in spectacular battles, but within ordinary hearts, patiently waiting for us to abandon hope, kindness, or courage. Lobelia's story, though, did not end there. In the Shire's darkest hour, she raised an umbrella, not a sword, to defend her home, proving even the bitterest heart could flicker back to light. Theoden, too, would rise, his final cry, "To me, O my people," a thunderclap breaking the spell of despair. Yet, Tolkien also knew the ordinary could defy evil with simple acts of courage. Even the smallest redemption could restore light. It's good to ponder, what about the smallest among us, those who seemed powerless, insignificant? Could true hope be found not in kings or wizards, but somewhere far humbler? Tolkien's darkest lesson is not about recognizing evil, but about understanding how quietly, subtly, it moves within us all. Yet, his greatest truth, his grandest revelation, is far more hopeful. For every Saruman bending to despair, there is a Samwise Gamgee planting seeds in poisoned soil. For every Denethor consumed by nihilism, there is a Frodo Baggins crawling forward when every muscle screams to stop. Middle-earth's fate hung not on armies, but on the quiet defiance of those who refused to let darkness dictate their choices. Middle-earth was ultimately saved not by strength, wisdom, or power, but by something far humbler, the stubborn endurance of two hobbits who refused to give up. Frodo, broken and bleeding, still whispered, "I will take the ring, though I do not know the way." Sam, when all light seemed lost, carried hope like a secret. There's some good in this world, Mr. Frodo, and it's worth fighting for. For Tolkien, this quiet, resilient hope was more powerful than any darkness. In Tolkien's world, true victory comes not from force, but from perseverance. Theoden, once paralyzed by despair, rode into battle shouting, "Death, ride to ruin and the world's ending," not because he believed he'd survive, but because he chose to meet darkness on his feet. Lobelia Sackville Baggins, a bitter soul redeemed, swung her umbrella against tyrants because even the smallest act of defiance chips away at despair. Evil loses its power when ordinary souls choose hope in the face of overwhelming odds. And perhaps this is Tolkien's enduring message for our time. Evil thrives wherever good people stop believing their actions matter. Wherever voices fall silent, hearts turn cynical, or hope is quietly abandoned. But remember, Sauron's towers fell to a hobbit's weary hands. The Shire, scorched and broken, regrew because Sam planted saplings in the ashes. No act of courage is wasted. No kindness, however small, is ever truly lost. Tolkien's hope is not naive. It is earned. It is the choice to keep walking when the road is black, to light a candle in a suffocating dark, to say, as Sam did on the slopes of Mount Doom, "I can't carry the ring for you, but I can carry you." So too can we carry one another. As we witness the tides of oppression rising in our world today, Tolkien's wisdom calls us not merely to identify tyranny, but to reflect on how it grows. It rarely announces itself loudly. Instead, it emerges quietly, justified by necessity, comfort, or fear. Yet, just as quietly, hope also persists. Tolkien reminds us that our everyday choices, the small acts of kindness, courage, and integrity, can become powerful acts of resistance against any rising shadow. Evil is subtle, yes, but so is hope. The question we must each answer is simple, yet profound. Which whispers will we listen to? This has been Middle-earth Unveiled. Thank you for watching, dear friend. I will never take your time for granted.